My name's Megan Riakos and I'm the writer, director and producer of the feature film Crushed. Crushed is a fully independent feature film made here in Australia. And when we set out to make this film, budget was really a massive consideration when we were deciding on our camera. I have a really great DOP who I've worked with several times before, Michael Steele. So he came with some ideas about what cameras we might be able to use and what cameras we might actually get access to for a really cheap rate. So he ended up securing us an amazingly good deal for the Sony F55. And originally the idea was that we were going to have a 3-week shoot broken up into 2 blocks, 6 days before Christmas and then 2 weeks after Christmas. And the idea was that we were going to be a single camera shoot for the majority of the time until the final week. And being a thriller film, all of the chase sequences and the climax, we were going to get a second camera for that final week. What we found out really quickly though is that after that first week of just having one camera, we realised that we were not going to get the film we wanted in the can unless we got a second camera. So we had this amazing deal to get the Sony F55 and we went back to the camera house to see if they had a second one we could use over Christmas, which is normally a really quiet time of year, but for some reason everyone was shooting this particular Christmas time. And they didn't have any more Sony F55s available to be our second camera. But what they did offer us was an Alexa, which is a far superior camera, but we already shot for a week on the Sony F55. So we really thought about, okay, can we make this second camera being an Alexa actually work for us? You know, obviously they have 2 incredibly different looks. And we did some tests and consulted a few people who worked in the online space, grading and doing colouring. And we realised that if we were to treat the Alexa in a certain way, we would be able to match the 2 different camera types in post, because essentially we were cross-shooting with 2 different cameras. Obviously not ideal, but when you're working on independent film, you just pretty much take what you can get. So we ended up working the final 2 weeks of the shoot. We did have 2 cameras and 2 camera teams, which was a lifesaver, and we really did get the breadth of coverage that we needed. But obviously that really did present some issues. So some of the things that we did to try and make sure that they matched was we were using coral coloured filters anyway for this film. We're shooting in a drought, outback kind of farm area, so we really wanted to have that warm feel. You know, when we were shooting it was roughly 30 to 35 degrees every day, which I think is roughly about 95 Fahrenheit. So really, really hot, and we wanted to get that look on the camera. The other thing that we did is we shot the Alexa in log so that we had as much information within the image that when we went back in post, we were able to then match the Alexa back down to the Sony F55. The other thing that's really interesting is that they're 2 very different camera sizes, and so a lot of this film was shot during using handheld, and when you've got one camera that's you know, quite heavy compared to the other, the Alexa is a big bulky camera. It did mean that our 2 camera operators, the DOP and our first or our second unit camera operator, the look of the handheld was different because they were dealing with the weight of different cameras, and that, you know, compounded by, I think most camera people have got a particular style when it comes to their own handheld, which is another thing to note. But having these 2 different size cameras and the bulk of the Alexa really did come into play. So in regards to the style of the film, we did research. Michael Steele and I came on board a couple of months before we shot, and we did talk about style, and some of the stuff that we were looking at was stuff with high contrast and shadows. You know, this is a film about the grey areas of what's right and what's wrong, and secrets that are hidden, and so we really wanted to have this shadow play. And some of the stuff that we looked at, we actually looked at some stuff outside of cinema, so we were looking at things like, you know, the painter Caravaggio, the darkness in some of those paintings, and also Bill Henson, the photographer Bill Henson. So we looked at those and had those as references for some of the night stuff. And in regards to kind of camera moves and things like that, you know, we were kind of looking at things like The Killing. Some of the beautiful shots that they've got in The Killing are really great. But we're doing a low budget film, and the speed that we had to shoot with meant that we couldn't necessarily get beautiful dolly shots or you know, shots that need quite a lot of setup for a film like Crushed. So we ended up deciding on the style that we knew was going to assist us with shooting a feature-length film in essentially 3 weeks, while still helping to tell the story and give it a mood and a feel that was unique to Crushed and really enhance the plot and the story. So basically the way that we decided to take the style of the film was to begin with, the film is quite steady. We do use a little bit of handheld, but there are some sticks. There's also a few very basic dolly shots early on. And as the film progresses, the handheld comes more and more into play. So towards the end, when there's quite a long kind of climax scene where there's chases and certain people come into the situation and certain people leave, and we wanted to have that kind of frantic quality of the handheld, while still obviously getting a great image, but using that kinetic quality of handheld to improve and help assist that feeling of nervous energy. The other thing that we did decide to do, which is to do more with the lighting aspect of the cameras that we use, is, again, we had a very small budget, so we didn't have any grips. We only had a gaffer and a best boy, and so we really reduced the number of lights that we needed for a film like this. So during the day, the majority of the film is shot with natural lighting, and at night we really used the bare minimum that we could get away with. There's quite a big chase sequence at the end in the vineyard, and we really couldn't afford traditional filmmaking day makers, so we literally went to the local, road building construction light hire place and got the kinds of lights that you would put up if you're doing road work in the middle of the night, and that presented a bit of a problem as well for us. Well, I guess I would say a challenge, and that is that the color temperature of those lights are not calibrated for film. So it was something that we just had to embrace and just take into consideration when the lights went up, because we had no idea what color temperature they were going to be. But I think overall we made the best use that we could have for the budget that we had. I would have loved to have had more lights to have lit the backgrounds in some of the night sequences, and also to sculpt shadows and play, which is some of the stuff that we looked at really early on, but it just wasn't possible with the speed and the facilities that we were shooting under. But I guess the whole indie film kind of mantra is do the best with what you've got. And so Michael Steele definitely pulled out all the stops and gave a really polished look to Crushed, but also a look that we could achieve really quickly and for a low budget. In the past, I've used a lot of different cameras in the past. I've used the Red camera, a kind of prosumer version of the Sony F55, the F3 on a previous film. I've also shot on 16mm, and then obviously on this film we used the Sony F55 and the Alexa. And we did also use Blackmagic for an Octocopter Shot that opens the film. At that point, the Octocopter Shot was done as a favour through a friend, and he was licensed for a certain weight to go on the Octocopter, and so Blackmagic it was, which suited us fine anyway. So I guess the other thing to note is that when you choose to use a number of different cameras, the post pathway can become a little more complicated because you're dealing with different codecs and different people need certain kinds of files. So it does just make that final kind of part of editing the film and onlining it a little bit more complicated when you use so many different cameras on the film set. So overall, I'm really happy with the look of Crushed. I think it's unique to the film. I think it's representative of the feel of the location that we've got, while at the same time giving us something that we could kind of achieve quickly and achieve for a really good price. So that's pretty much the look that we came to for Crushed. If you'd like to know more about Crushed, you can head to our website, crushedfilm.com, and we're also online at the moment on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Xbox in Australia, New Zealand and North America. Thank you.